Shalom, brothers and sisters. This is Dr. William Schnoebelen coming to you from With One Accord Ministries. And we have a teaching tonight about the Temple of Baal, or apparently multiple temples of Baal that are going up. This has been very much all over the internet, varying reports, and of course many Christians and spiritual warriors, prophecy teachers, and so on are up in arms about this. The fact that originally it was reported that they were going to take a replica of the temple in Syria that the ISIS terrorists had blown up. It was a temple to Baal, and as a way of kind of repudiating what ISIS did, supposedly they were going to take and make a digital reproduction of the gate of the Temple of Baal and erect it in Times Square in New York City and in Trafalgar Square in London. And there's you know how the internet is, there's all sorts of variations on that. Some have said there's going to be up to 1,000 of these things put up in various major cities around the world. Again, as a repudiation of ISIS. Well, you know, of course, a lot of people were saying, oh, well, this is evil. And, you know, and I'm certainly not wild about it either. And recently reports are coming out that they're not going to put one up in New York. I don't know what is true and what is not at this point, but it's not really the point I want to make. The thing I want you to understand is that, yes, there are significant spiritual warfare implications to putting up a pagan temple like that to Baal, who is, you know, like the archetypal evil deity in the around Israel back from the very beginning of the book of you know, Genesis and in the Torah. So obviously that's not good. The other thing that was worrisome is that supposedly these things were going to be started putting up on April 19th. Now, April 19th, as you may know if you've read my book, Lucifer Dethroned, is the beginning of a major satanic cycle of days that lead up to Beltane on May 1st. And this is called the Grand Climax. And a lot of people that are students of Satanism and the occult and prophecy have made a great thing out of it. Oh, it just happens to be they're doing this on this particular date, which is, of course, has become a very significant date in the last couple of decades due to the fact that there have been things like the Waco massacre took place on that day, and the Columbine shooting took place on that day, and there's a few other things of similar nature. So, you know, we can go only so far with these things. But, you know, what we need to understand about all this is that as worrisome as this is, and as important as it is that believers take a stand against this and do whatever they can in the way of both prayer and contacting their municipal leaders or their state leaders or whoever's involved with this, there's a larger issue involved here that some people may overlook. And just to help with this, I want to just talk for a moment about Baal himself. Baal appears over 100 times in the Tanakh, in the Hebrew Bible. And one of the most prominent places where he appears, and always, he's like the adversary to Yahweh, the Elohim of Israel. He is always the false El, the false deity that keeps trying to draw the people of Israel away from the worship of the true and living Elohim, Yahweh. So, and one of the most powerful examples of this is in 1 Kings 18, which is a relatively familiar passage, but I want to just highlight a couple things. This is the story about Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah the prophet, and his conflict with the 400 prophets of Baal. And what happened was, in his day, he was a prophet in Israel, and Israel pretty much fallen into apostasy. He lamented earlier on in this book, we're looking at 1 Kings 18 here, that there was nobody left, that he alone was only like holding the candle up for the worship of the true Father in heaven. And you see, when I say that is because Baal is a storm god. Baal is a sky god. He's related to, the thunder and the lightning and all the meteorological phenomenon that ancient people were so in awe of. And they had various different names for him throughout the Middle East. He was called Marduk. He was called Nimrod. That was probably his first name was Nimrod. He was called other names, Chemosh, Moloch, and in most cases, his worship was very similar, no matter what the name was. It always involved several things. It involved child sacrifice. It involved the worship of idols. It involved sexual immorality, from fornication to bisexuality to pederasty and pedophilia. Just about any conceivable, unrighteous thing you can think of sexually was being done in his worship, including the offering of infants on an altar where they were immolated, where they were burned alive before this pagan idol. Terrible, terrible things. And yet for some bizarre reason, our culture today feels the need to celebrate this by building these gateways that are supposedly simulacra of the gate of the Temple of Baal in Palmyra in Syria. Okay, let's look at what happened in this passage. Israel had almost totally apostatized. This was in the days of King Ahab and his queen Jezebel. And what some people may not realize is that the name Jezebel, which has come down to us through the centuries as a symbol of the wicked woman, the evil woman, and in fact, even in the book of Revelation, it is a symbol of a spiritual seductress who draws people into idolatry and false worship and fornication. And that's in one of the warnings of the churches in the book of Revelations at the beginning. In any event, Jezebel contains the name Baal right at the end. Her real name in actual Hebrew is pronounced Jezebel. And so right there's the name Baal. And her father was a priest of Baal. And for some, who knows what reason, the king of Israel married her. He wasn't supposed to, according to the Torah, but he did anyway. And as a result of that, we have this unholy alliance, and Israel went into apostasy because, see, what happens over and over again, and we see this cycle even to this, very day, where a nation will choose an unrighteous ruler, whether it's a president or a king or a prime minister or some other whatever. And because the king or the president is unrighteous, his headship looms over the entire nation, and it percolates downward. And it's just like a leaky roof, and all the crud and all of the stuff falls down from him or her, as the case might be, into the realm of the people. And so that's what happened in Israel. So at this point, Elijah is calling for a showdown. And he asks the king to send the 400 prophets of Baal, who were like the king's paid prophets, to come to Mount Carmel, which was a mountain in Israel, and have a showdown. And here's what happened. He says, this is 18:19 of 1 Kings. He says, this is Elijah speaking. Now therefore send and gather unto all Israel unto Mount Carmel, and the prophets of Baal 450, and the prophets of the groves 400, which eat at Jezebel's table. Now what's the groves? Well, groves are part, even today we talk about a grove of trees. Well, groves were sacred places, like a circle of trees or a gathering of trees, where people would go and worship trees. And yeah, believe it or not, they did that. And that's going on even to this very day. Like, for example, Christmas trees. So in any event, he's saying, these are the prophets of the groves, 400, and actually eat at Jezebel's table. So Ahab, verse 20, sent unto all the children of Israel and gathered the prophets together unto Mount Carmel. This is the line I want you to hear. And Elijah came unto all the people and said, How long ye halt between two opinions? If Yahweh be God, serve him, follow him. But if Baal, then followed him. And the people answered him not a word. And he was drawing a line in the sand prophetically and saying, okay, either you're with Yahweh, the true King of heaven and earth, or you are with Baal. And we know the story. It's one of the more celebrated stories in the Bible that he said, okay, you Baal priests, you go and you set up your sacrifice and call down fire from Baal in heaven. Well, they did that. They set up their sacrifice and they cried out, oh, Baal, hear us, oh, Baal, hear us. And they didn't get anything. Nothing happened. It was like, nada. And so they started jumping up and down and being more ferocious in their prayers, and that didn't do anything either. So finally, they started whipping themselves and gashing themselves with knives and doing and we see this even today. And I'm going to talk about what I mean in a moment, to try and get the attention of their false their false deity. And Elijah's kind of having fun with this. And he says, well, maybe you need to cry out louder. I mean, maybe he's on a trip, or maybe he's asleep, or maybe he's on the toilet. It actually says he said that. That word isn't used in the Bible, but that's what is meant. And, he's just making fun of these people because they're all a bunch of fools. They're all worshiping a false deity. And so finally, nothing happens. And finally Elijah says, okay, you guys have had your chance. Now it's my turn. So he gets up there, he puts an oxen on the altar, and he says, soak the oxen in water completely, get it totally sodden. And then he says, soak all the wood that would have been ignited by the fire from heaven so that it's totally sopping wet. Not only that, he says, then form a ditch around the sacrifice, the altar of sacrifice, and fill that ditch brimming with water. So there's all this water around. And then Elijah stands there and he cries out to Yahweh, the Elohim of Israel, and he says, show yourself mighty before these people. And right then and there, blam, fire comes down from heaven. It incinerates the ox, even though it was wet. It licks up all the water. It consumes all of the wood, and it even licks up all the water that's in the trenches. And it's one of the great moments in the entire Hebrew Bible, because all the people, the Israelites that are watching this display, they fall flat on their faces and say, Yahweh, he is the Elohim. Yahweh, he is God. And it was a real revival moment.